Established in January 1974, Kerry Cooperative Creameries Limited, or Kerry Co-op, celebrates a special anniversary, 50 years. This podcast series has been created by Mary Lavery Carrig, based on the first board photographed together in January 1974. This is Mary, and you are welcome to A Chat with Mary, Voices from Kerry Co-op's story. In this episode, episode 2, we hear from Tom and Brenda O'Connell, father and father-in-law, to the late Patsy O'Connell, Dixgrove, Farranfore, County Kerry. I asked them to tell me about Patsy's role in Kerry Co-op's early days.
Dad died in February. He had a stroke. His health never recovered from that. He was, I suppose, 5 months short of 90. As far as I can remember, it was North Kerry Food Products which started it all. And my father was not on the board of North Kerry Food Products. He was on the board of Kerry Co-op, but not North Kerry Food Products. So the people who started it really were the people in North Kerry Food Products. This is Killeen but it's Dixgrove Creamery area. He delivered his milk to Kern's Creamery. The milk in tanks on the back of a trailer, and then later on with a bulk tank. My dad, he disappeared off the farm here in the 50s and went off to London, well, basically all over England, but London. And in London, he spared as much cash as he possibly could, came back here every year. Over a number of years, managed to convince my mother to get married. She worked on the farm, she worked in the house. My dad worked outdoors on the farm, whereas my mother worked indoors and outdoors. It was a family of 6 kids. The co-op structure was that each creamery area, so in my father's case, Dixgrove, would elect a number of representatives. Those representatives then, between them, elected another set of representatives onto, I guess, the board of Kerry Co-op. And then later on, the board of Kerry Co-op elected some representatives put onto the board of the group, Kerry Group. So my father would have been elected in the local creamery, then on the area, and then onto the board. Well, he was very proud of the co-op. He did a lot of work for it, but he never spoke much of it at home. A very quiet man, very private, very hospitable, and he always helped out whoever needed it, but without anybody else knowing. He wanted his county to improve. He wanted farmers' lives to improve, and farmers' lives really were improved by the milk price. So the idea was to get a good price for the milk and a reliable price for the milk. In the 60s, farming is very unreliable. The cooperative movement was a means to an end, I think.
I think the importance and the impact of that gallon of milk was entirely felt by Patsy and his family, in that his intention was that his people, his community, his county would be able to expand upon that gallon of milk and turn it into education for their children, more modern farms for their members particularly, and just giving, I think, the community of Kerry in every aspect the ability to move out into the world, come back, not to have to immigrate for good. That as he had done, he had gone to the UK to earn money to come back and invest in the farm, and he felt it strongly that his family and his community and his people would thrive and prosper through a better gallon of milk, a family enterprise. And I think a co-op that reflected that. It was from the people of the people, and they were intending that Kerry Co-op and Kerry Group, as it became, would be, I suppose, the namesake of all of their activity. And 50 years on, you can see it's almost a triumph of what their families have achieved in this county. You know, it's a premier county in every way, but most particularly in creating what became a global enterprise from farmers of 50 years ago, you know, who were struggling, I suppose, to take it from a small co-op to what became a very significant co-op. And, 50 years later, I guess the means that these families still have, that we remain on the land, and that we have falling milk prices or rising milk prices, we still have the means through the co-op and through, I suppose, the group. We have the means and the ability to stay on the land and educate those that want to go. And the entire county, I feel, has benefited from, I suppose, the cash flow and the income that Kerry Co-op initially founded 50 odd years ago. It was hugely supported by the farmers and their wives. and it became, I think, a family enterprise that became a global enterprise. Certainly that's how he would have felt about it. In his final, months, as he was, very, very ill, unfortunately, but chatting, he was so proud. He was so proud to be in his place with his people in a county that was prospering and thriving. And he would have seen, from a farming point of view, he would have seen that being the beginnings of the entire story of where Kerry is today. As his daughter-in-law, and knowing him for 30 years, Tom and I and his brother cared for him in his final months. We had the great privilege of access to his thoughts and his attitudes to, I suppose, a life well lived, I think is how his daughter described it. The most private and the most discreet person that you could meet. Very modest person with enormous ambition. Would sit and listen. The amount of people who've told me that, he sat and listened for hours upon hours and solved their problems. And I know for that fact he didn't open his mouth. He would let them get to that point where there was either an issue had been resolved or a conflict. Often he'd sit and listen to two sides of a conflict and find a way for both sides to move forward. That was his particular gift, I think. At the funeral, obviously it's post-COVID and funerals are very different now, but at the funeral we were met over the very long wake and the day before the funeral itself. The numbers of people who had come from the locality, from the parish, from far and wide actually, it was quite shocking. They would press our hands and tell us their most desperate stories of points in their lives where they were at the lowest ebb and their means just would not meet what was asked for them. And Patsy, in their lives, had changed something for them, and he did it for so many people, and nobody knew. He was a discreet, modest man. He didn't think it was his place to ever mention it to anyone. And yet at the most desperate points in their lives, he made a change in their lives that set them off again and set them off on a path, and they never forgot, and they came to tell his children how much he had meant to them in this quietest fashion. It was all dignified, and there was never a sense of obligation other than they came to us at his funeral to tell us what this man had done. And that was very typical of Patsy. Patsy was a lion of a man, just very quiet. He was just very quiet in his ways.
Well, he had to go for a lot of elections. He had to go to meetings as well in the co-op and so forth. But the main time consumer was going for elections. And he had to travel around the county supporting other people who supported him in their elections. He was at one particular election where there were two candidates for election. One of the two, who was his candidate, the person he was supporting, didn't look like they were going to get elected. They thought they'd be short 1 to 2 votes. His candidate got elected, and the question was, how did this particular candidate get elected? Because he was short 2 votes, or short 1 vote. So they counted the votes and they counted the votes, and they couldn't understand it. Eventually, the person who was from the local area said that the opposing person had fallen out with one of his relatives, and he reckoned that his relative had voted for him. This is very amusing. But of course, if my father's preferred candidate could figure it out, so could the candidate who lost the vote. If my father was here, my mother and father would milk the cows. If he wasn't, then we all had to muck in. Yeah, I have recollections of that, getting up, milking the cows, and then getting ready to go to school, yeah. Well, my mother would get up early in the morning. You had to get up as early as necessary to have everybody ready for school. So that meant getting up at 5:30, 5:45, having your quick breakfast, milking the cows, setting the machine to wash, coming up here. Some of us went to the primary school locally, some at different times, and some of us went to secondary school in Killarney, and some of us went to secondary school in Castle Island. So it was a major operation every morning. My father was very forward thinking. He left the farm when he was young to go to England to earn enough money to build a farm here. So before he went to the UK, the farmhouse across the road, his cottage, was all of us here really. There was land and there was a cottage. When he came back, he had sufficient money to build this farm up to what you see now. But he was also ambitious for the county and for the country, but for the county and for the people here mainly. He would have seen the co-op as an opportunity to build for the county.
I wish to say a sincere thank you to Tom and Brenda O'Connell. Thank you too to Charlie Nelligan for concertina music. You have been listening to a podcast series, episode 2, from A Chat with Mary, Voices from Kerry Co-op's Story. This is Mary Lavery Carrig, and thank you for listening.